Oh, hello there, and welcome back to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini. Shabbat Shalomini to the Broccolodini. Yeah, and welcome to a very special sixth episode. Why is it special, you may be asking? Well, this will be the first installment in the Fables segment of the show, which will pop up every number of episodes. I haven't really decided yet. It may be random. And these Fables episodes will not be informational, educational, like the mainstay episodes of the Broccolodini podcast, but instead they will consist of my retelling to you a famed folktale, legend, or myth from some corner of the globe and some long-lost pocket of time. This week, and to start out, it will be my very, very personal favorite folktale, which I discovered about the time that I was 15 or so, which is getting to be a long friggin' time ago now. And that is the tale of Ivan the Ninny and the Mountain of Salt. Now, I hope this will be a rare pleasure for you, and that being because this folktale is hard to get your hands on. It's been retold hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different ways since its original or extant historical origin in the 1300s, 12th century. And thus there are so many different varieties of the story of Ivan the Ninny, or Ivan the Fool as he is sometimes called, that you're not gonna really get this particular story I'm telling you ever again. Even Leo Tolstoy has a version, I'm told. Well, without further ado, I would like to jump into this folktale. So, once upon a time, and we could certainly say it was a while ago, though it wouldn't be much of a folk story if we told you exactly when it was, because that's not so really the thing that they do in legends and myths. They didn't say, oh, this happened yesterday behind the 7-Eleven with your mother. It's a little more vague than that. So, once upon a time, in Russia, we could say this was well before the invention of the internet, and well after the invention of the wheel, and probably sometime in the 16, 15, 1700s, maybe, if you want to think about it like that. There was a wealthy merchant family, and this wealthy merchant family had 3 sons. And while the 2 elder sons of this family were busy being captains of the football team and getting straight B's in school, their youngest son, Ivan, the namesake of this tale, was often found laying under a tree, idly passing the day by, lost in his imagination. Already, Ivan was shaping up to be something of the village idiot. His parents mostly overlooked and ignored him, and his brothers were often rude, though in his simplistic and generally stupidly positive outlook on the world, he just thought of their behavior as horseplay instead of the truly mean-spirited viciousness that it actually was. Now the time came when the 3 brothers had come of age, and so their parents sent them off into the world. The two elder brothers were given beautiful, fantastic, powerful ships, crewed by experienced, strong young seamen, and given elder, expert navigators. And the family clearly didn't intend to keep Ivan, the youngest brother, around. And so they sent him off too. But they sent him off on a rickety old ship with a crew of experienced but elderly seamen and laborers, and a very young, inexperienced novice navigator. Yes, already our protagonist Ivan was getting the short end of the stick, and for the truly small crime of enjoying laying under trees. And who doesn't love a nice tree once in a while? But so, sometime after the two elder brothers took off in their beautiful ships, Ivan and his crew set sail on their old and rickety ship off into the Russian night. And with their young novice navigator, their old and, at this point, rather demoralized crew, as the crew was with it enough to realize they were on a rickety ship with an inexperienced navigator and the village idiot as a captain. Well, none of this added up to a lot of good stuff, and the ship very quickly found itself drifting off into uncharted waters. And to make things much better, a mist settled in, making it impossible to see the stars or moon amidst the dark Russian night. And before long, the ship, Ivan, the Ninny, the navigator, and the crew were all hopelessly lost. And as this reality set in, there was a small amount of panic, until suddenly the ship slammed up against something. "Land ho!" cried the old man in the crow's nest, suddenly awake. Ivan stumbled onto the deck, looked around, and realized he was needing all of a sudden to go out for a foray. And taking some of his favorite of the old crew members, he ventured onto the island. Now, the island was a strange white color, and Ivan had never seen anything quite like it before. As he neared the top of the center of the island, he looked about and started to get a strange feeling. He took some of the soil and put it in his mouth. Gnawing on it for a moment, he said, "Why, this is pure salt." And with that, his old man crew became about as exuberant as you could see old men becoming. And the crew gathered up as much salt as they could in giant bags, suddenly reawakened and revitalized by the thought that their strange journey might be a huge economic success after all. Indeed, the island they had stumbled upon was nothing more than a giant salt pillar sticking out of the ocean. A crystallized memory of oceans past. Now, with his ship full of expensive salt, and with the old man crew suddenly re-energized, the novice navigator truly wishing to do better and prove himself on this second occasion, goes to work plotting a course to the nearest available continental shore. And with a little luck and wind in the right direction, it's not all too long before the continent of Russia rises again on the horizon before Ivan the Ninny and his companions. Indeed, as they descend towards the continent, they see a great city take shape with turrets and onion domes and all the good stuff that you like when you're a sailor on the sea for a long time and haven't seen any civilization. Well, they are welcomed into port, and Ivan makes his way to the court of the local king. And after waiting in the waiting room for several hours, he is taken before this magnificent Russian local regent. And in the presence of the court, he says, "I have brought a great deal of salt from afar to sell you." And the king and the whole court kind of freeze up and start murmuring to each other. And the king finally breaks the silence and says, "Yeah, we don't know what you're talking about, guy. We've never heard of salt before. We're not looking for any funny business around here. I would appreciate it if you just back your ass up and leave." And Ivan protests, saying, "No, really, it's great stuff." But already the guards have their arms around him, and they drag him to the long staircase down from the palace and heave him. And as he is rolling down the many steps to the palace, he sees one of the court cooks coming up the stairway. And Ivan suddenly has a funny idea. Ivan, after getting back up, watches to the place where the cook disappears into a back service entrance to the palace, and he decides to follow the guy. Creeping up this back entrance, Ivan scales a small wall and finds a cook out there taking a break. Ivan promptly beats the living hell out of the guy. The one thing we know, as a Russian son, he should be able to do. And he takes the man's cook outfit and tosses the poor hapless guy off the walls of the palace. Now, disguised as a cook, Ivan finds his way into the kitchen, and he begins putting salt on the king's roast. When the meal is served to the royal family, the king eats with growing interest. Soon he asks for all the cooks to be called out from the kitchen, and he says to them, "This is the most amazing meal that you have served me in this palace for years on end. For years, I've lived in boredom with nothing new, the same old goose, the same old rice. But now, all in one day, you have changed my palate forever. Who is responsible for this?" And Ivan the Ninny in his cook garb steps out, and he holds out a little pouch, and he says, "I put salt on it." Amazed and shocked, and a bit pleased and humored, the king does a 180 and decides to buy all of Ivan's salt. But not only this, but also to give him his youngest princess daughter as a wife. So pleased is he with Ivan's salt. And so, stacks of cash and main bitch in hand, Ivan leaves the shores of this quaint Russian city with his noble crew. And they are sailing for some days upon the open ocean before, on the horizon, Ivan spots the flags of the ships of his elder brothers. Overjoyed to see them, Ivan sends up signals and flares and calls the ships over. Now, if Ivan was perhaps a little less of a fool, he might have realized that the looks of astonishment from his brothers were not meant as praise, but instead out of envy. But Ivan, as per usual, did not realize this. And unfortunately for poor Ivan, because once aboard, his brothers absconded with his treasure and with his princess, and had his elderly crew members and novice navigator tossed over into the ocean with Ivan himself, and ordered their old ship burned. And after a little while floating on the sea, Ivan says, "Hey guys, what the fuck?" But his brothers are already gone, as are, sadly, most of his elderly crew members. As a side note, the novice navigator washes up on an island inhabited only by mysterious witchy maidens who take care of him and give him nice blowjobs for the rest of his life. However, unfortunately, most of the old men drown, and Ivan is left on the surface of the dark Arctic waters with really no hope in sight. As he laments, suddenly a deep whirlpool forms around him, and he is sucked down in terror. Uttering what he imagines will be his last prayers, he is suddenly plucked from the waters by an enormous hand, as a creature which emerges from the whirlpool places him upon its shoulder. And after coming out of shock, Ivan realizes he is now face to face with a giant. And after a long moment, the giant says, "Hey, what are you doing out here, man? It's actually not a great place for little people like you to be. It's quite dangerous for folk your size." Now, Ivan, scarcely certain of where to begin, recounts the story of all that has happened to him, of the salt, the old men, the young navigator, the city that had never heard of salt, the grateful king, the treasure and the princess, and the evil, envious older brothers. And the giant attends to this story with the growing anger of a Latin or Italian cousin who you are telling the story of your breakup to. "Well, what the fuck," says the giant.
That shit's not right. I can't believe they played you like that. Yeah, says Ivan. It blows. Well, says the giant, we gotta make this right. Quick, let's go now, and we will catch them before they have been home for very long. And Ivan says, oh, well, shit, man. That'd be great. And so off the giant runs through the ocean, streaking towards Ivan's hometown at a speed that most humans at this time could only imagine. And Ivan, weary from his long day and a myriad of troubled adventures, falls asleep upon the giant's back. As Ivan awakens, the giant is nearing Ivan's hometown, bounding over the mountains. And the giant bursts into city limits just as a wedding between the young princess Ivan picked up and Ivan's eldest brother is about to get underway. And all the town and Ivan's parents are gathered. And they are quite shocked indeed to have sudden occurrence of giant blasting into town with Ivan on his shoulder. Shocked enough, indeed, that they give Ivan the floor to speak when the giant, roaring, blasts into the center of town where the wedding is being held and puts forth Ivan on his gigantic hand as a soapbox. Ivan tells everyone gathered the story of how he was betrayed by his brothers after the Mountain of Salt and the Foreign King and his many adventures, and how his crew died in the water. And the young princess, who had taken a liking to him, corroborates his story. Thus, the people of the town gather up his evil brothers and lock them away in prison, perhaps forever. And then young Ivan is married to the princess. Now, after all these long trials, at the wedding reception, Ivan becomes extremely drunk, and he tells a great deal of ridiculous jokes, which the townspeople all laugh at. And some of these jokes are about the nature of his new friend, the giant. How he is large and distorted looking, and all of that. Well, the next morning, the giant, who spends all night crying behind a hill because he's upset about the jokes, plucks Ivan from his nuptial bed in his new castle tower home and says, "Why did you tell these mean jokes about me after I helped you?" And Ivan says, "Well, you see, it's because I was drunk." And the giant says, "Drunk? I don't understand. What is drunk? I've never been drunk. I don't see how that changes the situation." And Ivan says, "Well, my friend, then we will just have to get you drunk so that you understand." And the giant says, "Well, all right, I guess I am down." And so, on that festive day, the townspeople, the best brewers and winemakers in the region, roll out barrel of mead after barrel of mead, and the giant drinks them like little sippy cups. And then they roll out their best wines one after another, until likewise the giant hath supped them all. Next they break into their beer, and roll out every last beer barrel they have to spare, until the giant has supped each one. And now, quite drunk, the giant becomes excited, and he dances about, laughing. And as he dances about and becomes more and more drunk, he becomes rather erratic. He begins falling over on houses and walls and smashing them over. And he continues his drunken romp through the village for the rest of the evening, until, upon awakening the next day, he looks around and sees the devastation he has caused. And, getting a awkward sort of tone suddenly rolling over him, he gathers up Ivan and says, "I think I see what you mean now, bro. I am gonna have to go at this point. I have stuff I gotta attend to somewhere else. I wish you a very happy future with your beautiful young wife. Later, bro." And with this, the giant tromps off over the horizon. Oh, hello there, and welcome back. Thank you for listening to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini. Shabbat Shalomini to the Broccolodini. The Eternal Podcast of the Broccolodini is brought to you by Ivan the Ninny's Research Institute for the Primitive Accumulation of Salt, and by Mother Russia. Mother Russia. She turns her back on us all in the end. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed making it, or at least somewhere close. Until next time, my friends. Derp.